This is a screencast on amping up your grammar and mechanics. By this point, you've written 2 essays, and I've been giving you feedback on the errors that you're making in your writing. And so these are just a couple of things that I wanted to go over that will help strengthen your overall skills and kind of help you just kind of up your game just a little bit. The first thing I want to talk about is really the power of punctuation. For something so small and seemingly insignificant, punctuation can really is such a powerful tool, and I wanted to kind of show you that in kind of a live form so that you can see just how powerful these little commas and periods and the way that you use them is so important. It's so significant. And the reason that I'm doing this is to kind of show you to make you more aware of the way that you are using it, and carefully reading your when you're proofing and reading and checking back over your punctuation and your mechanics, that you're looking at these things and just how much punctuation can change the meanings of sentences. So that's why it's important to learn how to use them correctly. So I've got this little letter here. It's a Dear Jack letter. I use this frequently in my classes when I'm teaching grammar. And so I've just basically got this little letter, and I always ask my kids to punctuate it. And I don't give them I don't preface anything. I just let them punctuate it as they will, putting in commas and periods or question marks or whatever kind of punctuation they feel is needed. And so I just did one. I'm going to show you here where I highlighted where I inserted punctuation. I'm sorry, I got the hiccups. I always do that when I start talking on a video. I start getting the hiccups. And so I want to read my letter to you in the way that I punctuated it. Dear Jack, I want a man who knows what love is all about. You are generous, kind, and thoughtful. People who are not like you admit to being useless and inferior. You have ruined me for other men. I yearn for you. I have no feelings whatsoever when we're apart. I can be forever happy. Will you let me be yours? Jill. So what I have created with my punctuation is just a very simple, lovely little love note here and I'm just using commas and periods and a question mark there at the end, and I have just a lovely little note. But let me show you something. Just by moving a couple of those commas around and repunctuating this, I can take this love note and turn it into something a lot more like a hate note. So just moving a couple of things around. Again, I highlighted so you could see where I moved the punctuation around on the screen. Dear Jack, I want a man who knows what love is. All about you are generous, kind, and thoughtful people who are not like you. Admit to being useless and inferior. You have ruined me. For other men, I yearn. For you, I have no feelings whatsoever. When we're apart, I can be forever happy. Will you let me be yours, Jill? Just by changing and shifting around that punctuation, I turned that lovely little note, that little love note, into a hate note. And so the purpose behind this is to show you that what you're doing with your punctuation matters. It can significantly change your sentence. And that's why it's so important for you to proofread carefully so you can make sure that you're using punctuation the way that you intend to use it. That's why it's important to learn to use commas correctly so that you're not misunderstood, or that your tone is not misunderstood. I didn't change any words in these 2 letters. The words are all the same. All I did was shift the punctuation around and create new sentences. And look at the difference that it made. So just be mindful of that when you are doing your writing. The second thing that I want to look at is you've really hopefully by this point you have moved away from those very simple sentences. Too many simple sentences can make for a very choppy read. I like cheese. Cheese is good. Let's eat cheese. Those simple sentences can become very monotonous and choppy when you're reading them. And so I've always encouraged you to kind of build up on your sentence patterns and try to start making sentences that are compound complex, a mix of simple and compound sentences and that kind of thing. So I wanted to kind of go over conjunctions with you for just a minute. Fanboys, you already know. Those are those for and nor, but, or, yet, so. Those are coordinating conjunctions. And so I wanted to kind of go over the sentence patterns for coordination. If you have two independent clauses, you can join them together with a comma and a conjunction to make a complex sentence. You can use an independent clause and an independent clause with a semicolon in the middle to make a complex sentence. Or you can use a coordinating adverb like consequently, furthermore, however, in addition, indeed, in fact, moreover, nevertheless, then, and therefore. Those are those conjunctive adverbs, and you can stick an independent clause with a semicolon, a conjunctive adverb like the ones I've listed, with an independent clause to make a complex sentence as well. You can also use subordinating clauses and conjunctions and to make complex sentences. So if you have an independent clause, you can use a subordinating conjunction like after, although, as, or as if, because, before, if, since, unless, until, when, or whenever, whereas, or while. With a dependent clause. And you notice that you don't need a comma when you use a subordinating conjunction. Subordinating is kind of like babies and mamas. So a mama is the independent clause. A dependent clause is that baby, and it can't be separated from its mom. So you can use a subordinating conjunction, but you don't use a comma because you don't want to separate the baby from the mama. The other thing that you can use is use that subordinating conjunction at the beginning of a sentence, after, although, as, before, if, since, all those subordinating conjunctions at the beginning, followed by, with no comma, a dependent clause, and then a comma with the independent clause. So after a while, comma, Mary decided she would go to the store. I know that's a random sentence, but that's an example of that. So that subordinating conjunction can come at the beginning, followed by a dependent clause, followed by the independent clause after a comma. Okay? All right, sentence list. There's a couple of these, and you have all of these you can look at. The documents are actually attached to Unit 3. But I wanted to kind of go over, we talked about one way that we can improve our writing is to study writing from other more successful authors and kind of imitate those moves in our own writing. And it's just kind of like one of those things. And so I wanted to give you some sentence lists that you could try to imitate for our patterns that you can imitate in your own writing, just to kind of give your writing a little extra oomph. Okay? And so there's several of them here, and I've given you the name of the pattern, which don't get caught up in the terminology. A lot of writers can't even name the structures or the patterns that they're using. But some of them you're already familiar with, like items in a series, where you have a series separated by commas. I don't want yours. I have screamed at her and went crazy, tearing at the house, crawling under the couch, yanking out drawers that hadn't been opened in years, using to help build a stronger, more vibrant sentence. Just make sure that when you're using series that you use proper parallelism. You'll notice that she here uses the same form of that ing gerund there, tearing at the house, crawling, yanking, that kind of thing. So you always want to make sure that it's parallel there. You can use present and past participles. You can use detached adjectives. Appositives. I like appositives. Those are nouns that rename a pronoun or any other name in the sentence and is set off by commas. So a snappy dresser all his life. He cherished the special occasion, especially since he changed clothes from a maintenance janitor at a synagogue in El Paso. He there is who the snappy dresser is. So a snappy dresser all his life is an appositive phrase that renames a pronoun in a sentence. sentence. I think that's an interesting thing. Cumulative sentence. We looked at that before. I'm pretty sure in the Normandy beachhead, the sentence about the tennis racket. It lies lonesomely in the sand, clamped in its rack, not a string broken. That sentence, that's when you have the main and essential clause that come first in a cumulative sentence, and then it's followed by a string of modifying phrases. They hold hands and whirl each other around and in and out, tapping like mad, their torsos upright and almost formal. My hand works automatically over the puppy's fur, following the line of hair under his ears, down his neck, inside his forelegs, and along his hot-skinned belly. Those are cumulative sentences where the main or essential clause comes first, and then there is a string of modifying phrases there. Some ones that you're probably not familiar with are isocolons. That is equal phrases. You know you've used it before, but you just didn't really know that was called. That's a pair of phrases or clauses of roughly equal length that's joined by usually a semicolon. But you can also join it with a comma conjunction. Those fanboys for and nor but or yet so. We will not rest. We cannot think of anything else. So similar, equal phrases, roughly equal length, roughly equal structure, is an isocolon there. Congeries are a pile of words that are descriptive images, and it's just kind of like details. They had on church clothes and funeral clothes, suits, white shirts, ties, gleaming shoes, and straw hats. That was from Jackie's debut. That story that you read in the last unit with the narrative essay. So that's a pile of descriptive images, accumulation of details in a sense. These are not difficult transitions from the sentences that you're already writing, but good writers are always going to be playing with their style, their writer's voice, and until you find ones that really work for you, and they need to be effective for task and purpose, obviously. But I want to encourage you to try to start amping up your grammar in your sentences, and maybe trying to put a few of these patterns into play.